The wrong button.
It started as an ordinary night in Pyongyang. Supreme Leader Kim Jong Un was in his underground military command bunker, surrounded by his top generals and closest aides. The atmosphere was light-hearted, even jovial. A feast had been prepared in celebration of North Korea's latest military parade, featuring a showcase of the country's most advanced intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs. Kim, enjoying a cigar and sipping on imported cognac, was in a rare celebratory mood. The North Korean state-controlled media had just finished broadcasting a propaganda film showcasing his nation's unmatched military might. In an effort to impress his generals, he ordered a demonstration of the nuclear launch interface. The bunker was a heavily secured facility, with dim lighting and flickering monitors showing real-time satellite feeds. A large central console was filled with buttons, switches, and a red-lit touchscreen displaying North Korea's nuclear arsenal status. Laughing, Kim reached toward the interface. He meant to press an inactive button, one that simply displayed a simulated launch. Instead, his finger slipped. A sharp beep rang out. On the screen, a launch sequence had been initiated. At first, no one reacted, thinking it was part of the simulation. But then the automated warning system activated. A chilling robotic voice spoke in Korean. Launch confirmed. Target coordinates locked. Estimated impact 35 minutes. Silence fell over the bunker. Kim's cigar slipped from his fingers. The generals, once relaxed, were now wide-eyed in terror. One of them stammered, "Supreme Leader, the launch, it's real." Kim's face twisted in confusion, then horror. The launch was irreversible. For years, fearing foreign cyber attacks or internal betrayal, North Korean engineers had designed the system without a manual abort option. Once a launch command was confirmed, the missiles would proceed to ignition, no matter what. At 11:43 p.m. Pyongyang time, 4 Hwasong-17 ICBMs, each carrying a thermonuclear warhead, roared into the sky. The missiles had pre-programmed targets, carefully selected over the years: Seoul, South Korea, the capital of North Korea's southern rival; Tokyo, Japan, a strategic U.S. ally and host of American bases; Guam, USA, a major military outpost in the Pacific; Los Angeles, USA, a symbolic strike on American soil. As the missiles streaked into the night sky, worldwide military satellites detected the launches within seconds. South Korea's missile warning systems blared. Within minutes, Seoul was in panic mode. Millions took to the streets, desperately seeking shelter. Japan activated emergency defense protocols. Air raid sirens rang across Tokyo as residents ran for underground bunkers. The Pentagon scrambled into action. NORAD confirmed the missile trajectories, and the U.S. president was rushed to the White House Situation Room. The world had just minutes to respond. The night sky over North Korea is suddenly torn apart by blinding flashes of fire as multiple Hwasong-17 ICBMs roar into the heavens. Thick columns of smoke and dust billow from the underground silos as the missiles leave their launch sites. The red glow of rocket flames casts eerie shadows across the landscape, illuminating the faces of stunned military personnel standing below. In the distance, alarm sirens wail and soldiers scramble for cover, unsure whether this is a test or the beginning of the end. Military trucks and armored vehicles line the roads leading away from the launch site, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Above, the fiery trails of the missiles carve through the sky, heading toward their deadly targets, each carrying the power to change the world forever. Inside the White House Situation Room, tension is at an all-time high. Large screens display the trajectory of 4 nuclear warheads, their red arcs curving towards Seoul, Tokyo, Guam, and Los Angeles. Military officials and advisors stand frozen, their faces pale as the reality sinks in. The U.S. president, barely awake after being rushed from his quarters, listens as a top general urgently speaks. Mr. President, we have 4 inbound nuclear warheads. Estimated time to impact, 25 minutes. We need orders, now. Meanwhile, across the world, Seoul, South Korea, millions wake up to emergency alerts on their phones. Sirens blare, warning of an imminent strike. Cars clog the streets as people desperately try to flee the city. Tokyo, Japan. The Prime Minister holds a crisis meeting as Japan's missile defense systems are activated. Fighter jets scramble into the air. Families huddle in subway stations, praying for a miracle. Guam, USA. U.S. military personnel rush to emergency bunkers, knowing the island may be moments from destruction. Los Angeles, USA. Panic spreads across the West Coast as news stations break the story. People flood grocery stores, gas stations, and highways, desperate to escape. But there is nowhere to run. The world is watching. The countdown to nuclear war has begun. At exactly 12 a.m., the first nuclear warhead reaches Seoul, South Korea. For a brief moment, the night sky is brighter than the sun. Then the explosion engulfs everything in a massive fireball. The shockwave obliterates skyscrapers, sending debris flying for miles. Millions are vaporized instantly. The once bustling city becomes a hellscape of flames and collapsing buildings. The streets that were filled with cars just minutes ago are now nothing but scorched wreckage. The iconic Seoul Tower crumbles, vanishing into dust. The Han River boils. Radiation spreads rapidly, sealing the fate of survivors who thought they had escaped. South Korea's government is paralyzed, the president possibly dead. Military bases are offline. In Washington, a chilling message arrives from the South Korean military. Seoul is gone. The world holds its breath. At 12:02 a.m., the second nuclear warhead races toward Tokyo, Japan. The city's skyline gleams beneath the moonlight, oblivious to the doom approaching from above. Millions huddle in underground stations, listening to emergency broadcasts urging them to stay calm. Meanwhile, Japan's Aegis missile defense system, stationed aboard naval destroyers, locks onto the incoming warhead. At 12:03 a.m., a missile interceptor launches from the Pacific, streaking toward the target at supersonic speed. It has one chance. For several agonizing seconds, military commanders watch radar screens in silence. Then, a blinding explosion erupts in the sky. The warhead is destroyed mid-air, sending flaming debris crashing into the ocean. Tokyo is saved, but at a cost. The nuclear explosion creates an electromagnetic pulse, EMP, instantly knocking out power grids. The entire city plunges into darkness. Millions stare at dead phone screens, silent televisions, and stalled trains. The metropolis, once a beacon of technology, is now a blacked-out, chaotic nightmare. At 12:05 a.m., the third warhead finds its mark. The U.S. territory of Guam, home to thousands of American military personnel, is struck with full force. Andersen Air Force Base is obliterated in an instant. The shockwave levels buildings for miles. The beaches and forests ignite, turning the tropical island into a wasteland. The mushroom cloud rises into the Pacific sky, visible from distant islands. The U.S. loses a critical military stronghold, and thousands of American troops vanish in an instant. The president is informed. Guam has been hit. No survivors expected. For the first time since World War II, an American territory has been struck by nuclear fire. At 12:07 a.m., the fourth and final warhead closes in on Los Angeles, USA. The missile streaks over the Pacific, its target locked. Downtown LA. On the ground, millions panic. Highways turn into parking lots as people flee in every direction. Some run for underground metro tunnels, while others pray beneath the Hollywood sign, hoping for divine intervention. Meanwhile, the U.S. missile defense system fires its last interceptors. At 12:09 a.m., just 30 miles off the California coast, a U.S. interceptor strikes the nuclear warhead in midair. A brilliant fireball erupts in the sky, followed by a massive shockwave. Windows shatter across LA. A deafening boom rolls through the city. Though the warhead is destroyed, radioactive debris falls into the ocean, causing widespread panic. The West Coast has barely escaped annihilation, but the world is still teetering on the edge of destruction. At 12:15 a.m., inside the Pentagon's war room, the President of the United States faces the most difficult decision in history. The nuclear football, a black briefcase containing the codes for America's nuclear arsenal, sits open before him. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, his voice steady but grim, declares, "Mr. President, the attack on Seoul, Guam, and Los Angeles was an act of war. We have confirmation that Pyongyang is behind this. Retaliation options are ready, awaiting your orders." A long silence. The weight of millions of lives hangs in the balance. Then, the order is given. At 12:30 a.m., from the depths of the Pacific Ocean, multiple Trident II nuclear missiles launch from U.S. Ohio-class submarines. Each warhead 100 times more powerful than the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, arcs high into the stratosphere before descending toward its target, North Korea's capital, Pyongyang. Inside the city, air raid sirens blare, but it's already too late. Citizens run through the streets in terror, searching for shelter where none exists. The ruling elite scramble toward underground bunkers, abandoning the people they once ruled. At 12:45 a.m., the first warhead reaches its target. A fireball engulfs Pyongyang, vaporizing the city's core within seconds. The Ryugyong Hotel collapses like a house of cards. The Supreme Leader's palace disintegrates into dust. Entire districts are flattened in a blinding wave of heat and pressure. A mushroom cloud rises into the sky, casting an ominous shadow over East Asia. The once mighty North Korean regime is wiped from existence in a matter of minutes. The world watches in horrified silence as nuclear hellfire consumes the nation. By 1 a.m., the war is effectively over, but the consequences are just beginning. South Korea is in ruins, millions are dead, Seoul is a radioactive wasteland, and the Korean peninsula is forever changed. Japan survives, but at a cost. Tokyo remains intact, yet the EMP blackout causes economic collapse and chaos. Guam is erased. The U.S. mourns its lost territory and prepares for nuclear fallout. Los Angeles, shaken but standing. The near miss leaves the city in chaos, but America remains intact. North Korea ceases to exist. What was once a dictatorship is now a scorched wasteland, silent and lifeless. As dawn rises over the smoldering ruins of Pyongyang, the world faces an uncertain future. Nuclear war has changed the course of history forever. No nation is untouched. No one is safe. In the White House, the president stares out the window, the glow of a new sunrise barely piercing the heavy fog of war. The world as we knew it is over. 1 week after the nuclear exchange, the Earth is barely recognizable. The war may have lasted less than an hour, but its consequences will span generations. The Korean Peninsula, a graveyard of nations. Where Seoul and Pyongyang once stood, there is now only desolation. Fires still rage in the crumbling ruins. The few survivors, burned, starving, and exposed to lethal radiation, wander through the ash in search of food and shelter. Korea, once divided by ideology, is now united by devastation. Tokyo's blackout and collapse. Though spared direct destruction, Japan remains crippled. The nuclear EMP pulse has fried the nation's power grid. No electricity, no internet, no running water. The economy collapses as food supplies dwindle. Desperate citizens storm supermarkets and government buildings, fighting for survival. Without power, Japan is thrown back into the Dark Ages, the American fallout. While Los Angeles still stands, panic grips the US. Millions flee inland, fearing further attacks. The stock market crashes, supply chains are shattered, martial law is declared in major cities. The president addresses the nation, but his voice is hollow. America has won the war but lost its sense of security. Radiation clouds and the coming famine. The jet stream carries radioactive particles across the Pacific, poisoning the air, water, and soil. Acid rain falls over China and Russia. Crops fail. Livestock dies. Farmers refuse to work their fields, fearing contamination. Within weeks, a global food shortage begins. The Great Refugee Crisis. Millions of Koreans flee to China, overwhelming border towns. Japanese citizens desperately try to leave the island, seeking refuge in Southeast Asia. American West Coast cities face an exodus inland as radiation fears spread. Global governments struggle to handle the chaos, with riots breaking out worldwide. The death of diplomacy. The United Nations collapses under the weight of global blame and fury. Countries turn inward, focusing only on their own survival. Trust between world powers disintegrates. Russia and China condemn the US for its retaliation, while NATO nations prepare for more conflicts. The world has survived nuclear war, but not without irreversible scars. Months pass, the skies darken with nuclear winter. Global temperatures plummet as ash clouds block out the sun. Without sunlight, crops fail en masse, leading to widespread famine. Governments collapse one by one. Society crumbles into lawlessness. Survivors form warlord factions, scavenging what little remains. Cities become battle zones over food and clean water. Technology fades. The once great superpowers are now hollow ruins, their capitals silent and abandoned. The internet dies. Electricity becomes a memory. The world is thrust back into a new dark age, some whisper of a future rebirth, of survivors banding together to rebuild. Others accept their fate, knowing humanity's greatest war was also its final mistake. As the last embers of civilization flicker out, only one truth remains. Mankind has undone itself. Years later, in the ruins of what was once Washington, D.C., a lone radio broadcast crackles through the static. A voice, weak, tired, but defiant, speaks. If anyone can hear this, we are still here. The world is broken, but we live. If you are out there, do not give up. There is still hope. The signal fades. The world is silent once more. The end.